Folks, we're going to begin in 1 minute. All right, good evening. My name is Benjamin Kossel. I am one of the Deputy Public Affairs Officers for California Incident Management Team 15. And I would like to welcome you to our community meeting tonight about the coffee pot fire. We've got a lot of speakers lined up for you tonight. I'm going to go over the agenda real quick before we go into it. So we will be hearing from Clay Jordan, Superintendent, Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park, CAL FIRE Tulare Unit Chief, Andy Turner. We'll get an operational update from our Ops Chief, Rick Dackhouse. We'll hear about all the fantastic air operations you've been seeing going on the last couple of days from John Crotty. We're going to take a look at our long-term fire behavior with our long-term fire behavior analyst, Rita Cripperton. Then we're going to hear from Charlie Norman, Tulare County Fire Chief, and our closing comments from our Incident Commander, Nick Elmquist. Now, before we turn it over, if you had any questions, there should have been some index cards at the front here for you to write your questions on. If you have those and you have a question, please get it to any one of the folks walking around here, specifically us information officers, so that we can get them to the appropriate people when we go into our Q&A. So with that, I'd like to bring up Clay Jordan, Superintendent, Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park.
All right, thanks very much. Good evening, everybody. Good. You know, I thought there's a couple of things I wanted to begin with. And first is kind of an overview at the 10,000 foot level, kind of what has progressed over the last couple of weeks on the fire and what our current status is. And I think that will set you up well for then the deeper dive that the team will then, when they walk around the map and talk in a much greater detail, and then hopefully then they'll also kind of talk about what we might expect over the next couple of weeks and what the plan is and where we're headed with this. So at the end of the evening, at the end of our session, hopefully you'll have a good sense of the fire at different levels. Sound reasonable? Okay, so, and I got some notes here, make sure, keep me on track. So 9 days ago, it was our last public meeting, and when we gathered to talk about it. And at that time, California Team 15, the incident management team, was pretty new. They had taken over the fire just a couple of days before from California Team 5. And at that time, the other team had really been putting a tremendous effort on the west side of the fire, right, closest to the communities most immediately at risk, and on the south side. By the time Team 15 took over, this was pretty well held. You know, we didn't necessarily call it contained. We don't like to call something contained until it really holds for a while and we have really good black that's holding. But what was so impressive by the efforts a couple of weeks ago is that, and 10 days ago, was that this was a really difficult ridge to secure. And, but you could see the advantage of cutting that off. We have all these other contingency lines, right, to the west. And, but that's obviously a much bigger box, and it's always been our objective to have as small a box as possible to contain this fire. And so through some great efforts by the federal and CAL FIRE resources in particular, really did some tremendous work. And be honest with you, many of us didn't have a lot of, optimism that this box would hold, but because of the tremendous efforts, it did. And so now, notice all this black here. Same thing along the south, where we had homes that needed protection on the south. That's all now black line, which means we're considering it contained. And it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It doesn't mean that the threat is gone altogether. We still have to maintain vigilance. We still have to patrol it, and we can always get something that slops over, and we're running to catch it again. But we're feeling really good about it. So then about 9 days ago, when Team 15 was in place, at that time, the real excitement was focused in the northwest corner, which also posed, again, a lot of terrain out here if we weren't able to catch it right here. Again, an enormous amount of effort, and again, a big question, would we really be able to catch it here? And the stars aligned, everything went well, and now we're feeling really good about the northwest corner of this, which really relieves a lot of the pressure off the Hammond area and all the Three Rivers area, the South Fork area, and at the same time, really good progress along the north end, which was along the East Fork. And by the way, I meant to do this first just to get your orientation, help you get oriented. So this is the South Fork, the river down here. This is about where the South Fork campground was. This is roughly the park boundary coming up like that. We have BLM lands. This is the East Fork going up, and this is Silver City up in here, just to get your sense. This is still showing red here, right? That means we don't have black line right up to it, but the fire has really halted in that area. It has really burned itself along the edge, and we're feeling really good about that north section. Still not ready to call it a black line yet, but again, a lot of success. Now, at the same time that these efforts were made to cut this and to hold this in the northwest and the northern section, crews were at the same time working this east side, knowing that would be the next area of concern. And as you can see, a lot of black line in that section, which is really also some really good, impressive work. So now, 9 days later, this meeting, now the attention has really focused on this east side of the fire, and particularly up in this northeast corner of the fire. And what we're talking about here is some really difficult terrain. Once again, we've been plagued by really difficult terrain since the beginning, and this is a really tough ridge to try to contain fire, and then trying to take advantage of the Horse Creek that comes down to the confluence of the East Fork, and that is the box we are trying to contain the fire within now. And even though it's some weak holding features there that normally we might be looking for other alternatives, or the firefighters would be looking for other alternatives, as the team will explain in a little while, there's not a lot of good alternatives out here without that box being a lot bigger. So there is a lot of value to really trying to catch this thing here. And there's been an enormous amount of air resources, ground resources, a lot of different agencies working together to try to make that happen. And the last few days, there has been some real good success. However, this is not a done deal up in this section. This effort will continue for days on, and we're not going to probably feel good that this is covered for a good number of days at this point. If the fire is not contained within this box, or first of all, let me say, if the fire is contained along this line, that is kind of our primary containment strategy through here, then the fire really isn't going to get a whole lot bigger acreage-wise. We'll have it, this will be the footprint of the fire, with little tweaks and adjustments. If the fire does come out of this box, and it could happen anywhere, along this, then we're talking about a longer range strategy with a lot more resources, a lot more fire on the land, and a lot more acreage. And the fire will certainly move closer to the Silver City and the Mineral King communities over the next couple of weeks. And so the team is going to talk about those details of what that contingency will look like. The firefighters never put all their eggs in one basket. They always have contingency plans. That's why you see so many of these different lines out here, and they have been working the models for this as well. So that's a little bit of what is happening at that 10,000 foot level. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about So the other thing I wanted to do was to kind of explain the fire organization and how it relates to the National Park Service, to CAL FIRE, to the BLM, and to the Tulare County Fire Department, and how these agencies are working together. As we've been talking about since the beginning of this, just like we talked about in KMP, when we have a fire on the landscape, it doesn't matter what terrain it's in. There's a tremendous rallying of resources by all these agencies, federal, state, local agencies coming together and working together, and that's been a great success on this fire as well. When we go into the incident command system, though, we also have, we create an organizational structure that is tied to legal jurisdictions on the ground. And there are a complicated set of agreements as to who has that primary responsibility. Now, from your vantage point, you may not really notice because you're going to see county units all over the footprint. You're going to see CAL FIRE units. You're going to see the federal units all over. But we do have we do define those responsibilities. And on parkland, which is basically the right side of this map here, the National Park Service has that primary jurisdiction, primary responsibility, including the private lands and in Mineral King. When you go to the west of this, for the most part, the CAL FIRE has responsibility for wildland fire protection on the lands west of the park. BLM is in there. They have a good bit of land in this section and up in here. And by agreement, those BLM lands, and BLM is always also very involved in these firefighting efforts and strategies. But by agreement, CAL FIRE takes primary protection over much of the land, and then the Park Service has a piece of that as well. So we are managing this because the fire straddles the federal responsibility and the state responsibility. We are operating under unified command, which means that California Team 15 is operating under delegation of authorities by the agency administrators on the federal side, which is me, and on the state side, which is Chief Andy Turner. And so they operate under that unified command structure. CAL FIRE has provided an incident commander within the team so that you had this seamless operation. And I point this out in particular because, as you can see, all this black on basically the state protection, things are getting pretty buttoned up. And for that reason, CAL FIRE will come out of that unified command over the next few days. And Chief Turner will talk about what that means as far as CAL FIRE involvement after that. The ICS structure is designed to be fluid, and it may be that at some point in the future that then the county could enter into a unified command. Now, I want to clarify the county's role, which is really critical in all this as well. The land itself, we talked about as far as being that federal and state jurisdictions. The county fire department has responsibility over structural protection up in Mineral King, and then, of course, everything outside the park. So the county plays a critical role in all this, regardless of whose land it is. So you have all these agencies working together within these delegation of authorities, and it is fluid. So just because you might see an agency join into Unified Command or out of Unified Command, when you see those evening updates, it doesn't mean that, you know, somebody has pulled all the resources off the fire. But I wanted to just kind of set that up. I think now, I think we're in a good position to kind of continue the story. I'll turn the mic over to Chief Turner, or with your permission, and then afterwards the team will then do the deeper dive, and then Chief Charlie Norman will talk about the county involvement, especially if we get closer to the Mineral King community. All right? Thanks.
Thank you, Clay. And like he said, my name's Andy Turner. I'm the unit chief here in Tulare Unit for CAL FIRE. Thank you so much for allowing me to come up and speak to you on behalf of the department. Clay actually did a really good job of explaining how complicated it is for fire protection in California and the wildland. If there's anything we do good in California, it's complicate things. And this thing is so complicated, it takes some of our chief officers years to study it to figure out who's responsible for what and how we do things. But we swap land back and forth across the state in an effort to make sure the closest resource is protecting the land that they're near. And that's really the whole point. And so that's why we have that line drawn down the middle, and we pick up the BLM's piece, and on the other side of the Sierras, the BLM, they cover our piece. And somewhere in the mix there, the private property that's in Silver City, the park picks that up for us. So like Clay was saying, we are getting ready to exit Unified Command, and the reason for that is because this piece is all black line. It's all contained. It's controlled. I'm 100% confident that it is going to hold. And so while that was done several days ago, we still have an obligation to do fire suppression repair on all of this dozer line and all the roads and in the timber and all the other stuff on both the BLM and the CAL FIRE land. That's our responsibility. And so we are going to stay until that's done. We hope that that's done here in the next couple days, but maybe not. And if it's not, we'll just stay in. But what it means when we leave is that we're really just getting out of the share of cost of the incident. It doesn't mean that we're going to pack up our stuff and drive away and be done. Our local battalion chief, Jay Gates. Jay, you're here? Raise your hand. He's a local boy. He's going to stay involved as the agency rep for CAL FIRE. We're going to maintain a group of overhead and some heavy equipment to continue that suppression repair. And we're going to stay laser focused on what's going on up the river. Even though the park has the responsibility for that fire protection in Silver City, it's still private property. And I'm still committed to tilting the table and sending all our resources up there if we need to. Now, that if is just diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. Every day that we go on defense or we have a bad day out on the fire, and it's only been a handful, probably less than 5. Every day that's happened while we've been here, ever since the very beginning, we've had 4 or 5 days of really good. And so 2 days ago, we had a bad day where fire got across a little piece. And for 2 days, we've been having really favorable, really hard work, really great progress. And the outlook is amazing, and there's with the weather and the fire behavior, and you'll hear the guys talk about it, but I'm really confident that we're going to have success based on the history of this fire and the way it's looking. So that's CAL FIRE's piece. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for that, Chief Turner and Superintendent Jordan. With that, and really doing a great job of setting up the foundation for what the team is going to talk about next. So with that, I'd like to bring up our Operations Section Chief, Rick Dackhouse, for an operational brief.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Dykehouse. I'm one of the Operations Section Chiefs for California Interagency Incident Management Team 15. Clay and Andy kind of gave you this big high level, right? I'm going to give you the down and the dirty level, that what you guys all came down here to find out what's really going on. But what I will say is that this is what right looks like. California Fire Service and all these different agencies between CAL FIRE, the parks, and then Tulare County, and then the team here, is that this is what right looks like. This is how fires get put out, is that our ability to work together seamlessly. And these guys are going to figure out the checkbooks and all that stuff later, but what we're going to do, all of our agencies, is we get together and we serve you, the people in the community. So we're going to go kind of get into the nitty gritty here. So the control objectives when we got here were to keep the fire north of the South Fork, east of Mineral King Road, south of Mineral King Road, east of Horn Mountain, and west of Cahoon Creek. Next slide. So here's the current statistics for the fire. We're at 13,999 acres. We're right now 41% contained, and we have 1,062 firefighters that are on the ground working. Next slide. There's the operational map that you guys saw when we started off. And so how we have this set up organizationally is that we've got 3 branches, and that's kind of the higher level supervision. We've got branch 10, branch 20, and there's a suppression repair branch, and then there's 7 functional divisions or groups underneath that, and they report to those branches. So each piece has a geographic piece of dirt from which they work, or a functional group in which they do. So we talked about the suppression repair. Suppression repair is a group, it's a functional group, and their job is to fix all of the damage that is done during the suppression of the firefighting. All of the letters that you see moving around, that's a geographic area that they're assigned for fire suppression activities. Next slide. So to know what the fire's doing, we kind of have to know where the fire was and what's happening. The fire started on, the 3rd, so a little over a month ago. This is mostly a fuels-driven fire, which means that the fuels on the ground is what's generating the movement. When that fuel gets in alignment with the topography, with slope and wind, that's when we see the movement. So tonight, this is a little blown up. If you go back in that back corner map, that's a really good depiction of the fire growth and when it moved by date. The colors represent the days that it moved and the dates associated with it. So as we move around, you can kind of see where the fire started, where it moved around, and into the yellow, and now into the red pieces here. This is the latest pieces where it's been moving. Next slide. So this is the area that we're all concerned about right now, as you saw the black line and all the containment features that are in there. The East Fork of the Kaweah, and then the Horse Creek drainage. Next slide. Actually, let's stay here for a second. I'll describe this a little bit. So Mineral King Road here, this purple line that's in there and those pink dots, it represents area that we put retardant. So normally you associate retardant coming out of the aircraft. Well, we took some water tenders and were able to take retardant and put it on the upper side of Mineral King, and then we chipped on the bottom side. So that part of the map depicts where retardant was actually put on the road. In case the fire came out of the East Fork, that we had the ability for firefighters to make a stand there so it wouldn't make a run. All of these pink H's are indications of proposed hand line. That's where hotshot crews go in there and cut away the vegetation down to bare mineral earth and put the line in place. And then these purple 12 right there, that's a helispot. So that's an approved landing spot for a helicopter to be able to land so we can insert troops and supplies. And then the outer edge of the red is obviously the fire's edge, and then you see the black H's, that's completed line. So that means that line is actually completed and verified. Next slide. So in this spot, this is the Horse Creek and the East Fork confluence. East Fork's coming through here. Here's the Horse Creek drainage that comes through here. These depictions here are the infrared. So we get infrared satellite imagery on what's going on. It helps with our decision making, let us know where the fire's at, where we can put our troops in there. The East Fork drainage, and then you have the Cahoon drainage and the Grove that's right in here. This SS-56 is a sling sight. So that's not approved for a helicopter, but what we can do is lower in equipment to firefighters that are there. We use natural barriers, this granite that's coming right up this unnamed drainage, as a holding feature because the fire is obviously not going to burn through granite. So that's a good place to try and hold the fire. And then coming down the drainage here, and these yellow lines depict ridges that we use that we thought were the most optimistic, the best chances for us to hold. H13 and H14 represent helispots that were put in. Next slide. So kind of the pan out a little bit is that we're all kind of familiar with Homer's Nose up in here. Now we can see the East Fork, and then we can see coming up Horse Creek drainage. And you can kind of see just how steep the country is in here. Next slide. There's a little bit better close up in there. So as the fire came down, we continued to sit there and put lines and try and hold it in that spot. And then a couple days ago, it spotted right across where the spine comes down the Horse Creek drainage. And currently crews are working in there, and retardant is put in there to try and hold it in that spot. Next slide. So here's some pictures that we took when we were out here on the line. This is the Horse Creek drainage here, and then coming through here is the East Fork. Next slide. So in this partnership is that we're sharing all the aircraft that we have. So some of the aircraft are CAL FIRE aircraft, some are federal aircraft, some are contract aircraft. So in this slide here, coming down this spine, you can see one of the CAL FIRE S2s coming here and painting the ridge. Next slide. Here's another example of an S2 coming in, and we continue to paint that ridge coming down. Next slide. And then that line that was coming down that I showed you, this is one of the sky cranes. And so those are helitankers. They can actually take water, or we can put retardant in them. We have a mobile retardant base where we mix the retardant, and those helicopters can be filled up, and they're flown up into here. You can see how steep the topography is in there. It's so difficult to get boots on the ground, and crews to be able to commit in something that's that steep with fire below them is extremely dangerous. So the ability to put retardant in there, check and hold the fire so that we can get crews in there and actually cut lines imperative. Next slide. So this was taken just the other day, or yesterday, 1545. You can see how the fire behavior is moderated. You can see where the retardant line was put in, and then on the backside where it kind of hooked in, and you can see on the top here where it's pink, and then coming down. Sorry, I'm blocking halfy, aren't I? And then coming down here where the retardant line was put in there. We currently have crews that are actually cutting in hand line direct, and they're all the way up to the smoke as of this evening. So we've just about got this thing wrapped around there with line. Doesn't mean that it won't come out, but that hand line's a direct control feature because it takes the vegetation away. Next slide. And then these slides here kind of show you the prep that's being done on Mineral King. On the East Fork side, all this chipping that's done below, and then I talked about the water tender application of the retardant. That's done on the high side. So if the fire does spot coming out, makes it across the East Fork, runs up, reverses slope, is that this fuel is taken out so that firefighters have an opportunity to make a stand if it runs and comes over. Next slide. And then just more example of the chipping. Next slide. And one more. That kind of shows you the work that's being done. With that being said, is it being a fuels-driven fire, is I map the fire out, it's about 5 miles wide. And so now looking, projecting out, it's about 5 miles away from Silver City. It's taken a month for it to grow where it's at. In the conditions that we've had RHs at 12%, we've had temperatures 104, 105 down here in Three Rivers. So with this favorable weather coming in, I think we got a really good opportunity to turn the corner on this. But moving into tomorrow, because what Clay said is that we don't put all our eggs in one basket. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start moving resources down Mineral King towards Silver City. You guys are a fire-hardened community. So one of the things that's beneficial about that is that with Tulare County is that during that KMP complex is all those structure defense plans were already built. So they already know where the structures are, what the threats are, what the egresses are. So as they start to move out there, they have those plans already. We already have them in the pocket. We're all ready to go. So if you start seeing them moving out there, we're just preparing for the what if, not because it's gonna come, but just because of the potential. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Yeah, Rick, thank you for that update. And now with an update on air operations, John Crotty.
Good afternoon, evening. So I'm with Team 15, the Air Operations Branch Director, work underneath Rick Dykehouse and our Ops Section Chief Scott Grasmick out there. When we talked 9 days ago, we had a few more aircraft than we do now, which is a good thing. That means we've sent some aircraft away for different missions. If you remember those super scoopers that were pulling water out of Kaweah Lake, they got sent up north for fires up there where they're more beneficial, and where we were using them here, we were kind of running out of real estate to use them effectively. So we want to be safe, efficient. We do risk management to use the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. The helicopters obviously are still in play. You see a lot of them flying over. And they're used in multiple functions there, and Rick mentioned some of those helispots on this east side here. We have spike camps with about 70 people on 2 different spots out there. They're basically overnight backpacking for 3 to 4 days. No showers, but what do they need? Water, food, saw gas, things to keep working. So we logistically support them by carrying some sling loads, 1,000 pounds of cargo out to support them, keep them working without having to bring them back and forth. Sometimes we do have to shuttle them because they're timing out. They do 14 days of work before they go get some days off and move to the next fire or come back. So then we would have to transport those firefighters in helicopters, fly them out to those helispots. So we're about to get into a mode of some heavy troop shuttling. So a lot of our medium aircraft are going to be tied up in that, flying those crews in and out to replace some of them and bring some out where they're not needed anymore. And then you also see those helicopters doing water drops, and then he showed you the helitanker doing the retardant drop. Water dropping, really effective, especially with these water features. You've got Kaweah River there, and you also have that Horse Creek drainage where we're pulling water. But being so close to the fire, we had days where we were dropping 200,000 gallons of water on the fire per day, which is big water. You'd think it would be big impact, but it's a stubborn slope, stubborn fuel with that heavy timber and that brush. And without firefighters close in to work some of that stuff, we're really just trying to hold fire back to buy them time to get in there and cut their line and do their business. Retardant-wise, mobile retardant base was set out by Exidor. We found a field out there we could get that set up. And once that came into play, we've dropped about 330,000 gallons of retardant out there between that and the ground application you saw on Mineral King Road. Sounds like a lot. It's the equivalent of about 110 air tankers over a 14-day period, potentially. So that's really only about 8 to 10 air tankers a day. So when you have 5 miles of line just on one side of this fire, that's a lot of line to put retardant on, and it's not very wide. And when you have flame lengths of excess of 50 feet, you want that to stand and hold and not have anything spot across that. So it's effective. The good thing about it is it's close. Those air tankers that Scott had talked about or Rick had talked about, those things that the state and the feds have in the system are great for initial attack, and they're really good on suppressing fire when it's small and in its infancy, and they're also divertible. So what's happened down south with all those structure threats, with those fires down there and structures being lost, those air tankers get sent to that over a priority fire where we have vegetation out here and not much structures out close by. So we lose those air tankers. So the benefit of that mobile retardant base is with our helicopters, it's here. We're not going to have that divert. They're here for our use. So it's a win-win for us to have that in play. Working with that mobile retardant base and those retardant drops, whether it's air tankers or helicopters, we want to work with resource advisors. When you look out there, if you drive Mineral King Road, you're going to see gaps in that retardant. And we see gaps out here as well on the landscape because we don't want to get it in the waterway. We try to keep it 300 to 500 feet away from getting it down into the water sources and letting it go out into the water system. So it's environmental concerns just because of the nature of that. So we use it up on the ridges, up on places where it doesn't have near the environmental impact. Let's see, the medevac issue. We always try to protect our firefighters. We do have a hoist aircraft from Kern County staged in Visalia. Over the time we've been here, we've only used it once to extract a firefighter that was injured. Luckily, it wasn't anything too serious, but we were able to extract him, and he's doing very well, so got him out to the hospital, and he's doing a lot better. So that aircraft will still stay in play as long as we're out there risking some firefighters with that hard work out there. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was that UAS, so that drone out there, that unmanned Romeo 3-1 that we call it. And it's doing some surgical work for us. It does infrared, so it spots those heat sources, whether it's at night or in daytimes, then things that we may not see, whether it's not showing smoke or not showing flame. It tells us where fire is at. It tells us if it's across the line and a concern for us. And it also can do some of that surgical aerial ignition. We talked, I think, a little bit about that last week, and you kind of can see some of that here as you come down this Division J line there, that little piece of line there where we had retardant, and we fired that with that little drone, dropping those little tiny eggs, and did some very low intensity firing to backfire away from that retardant line to give us a better buffer where we knew it was so steep we would never put firefighters in there. And then we just backed that up with water drops and retardant drops to keep that fire kind of pulling away from that line to give us that safety area to not let fire continue out to the east toward Horse Creek Canyon or out toward Mineral King as well. So real good low intensity firing, worked very well in the sequoia groves to protect the trees, and that backed that down out of that area to make it a less impact on the resources as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So when we were here 9 days ago, obviously this was a very different fire, and we had our current fire behavior analyst up here to talk to you. With where we are now, we'd like to talk about some long-term fire behavior with Rita Clipperton.
Good evening, everyone. Rita Clipperton, long-term analyst trainee. And I work closely with the FBAN. Long-term analyst focus more on a little bit farther in the future primarily, normally about 3 days to a few weeks into the future, looking at fire potential. Some of the products that I produce are used to help inform decision making, showing potential to where the fire could go. And so one of the things I write on those products is that this model shows what could happen with no suppression efforts and no barriers. And so I'm going to show some of those potentials to you tonight, and where some of the challenges are with the fuels and the weather and topography with this incident. So what the firefighters are looking at for where the challenges would be. So this first slide, let me see if this pointer will work. Can you see that? Okay, this will look familiar. We're looking across East Fork of Cahuilla from Mineral King Road up Horse Creek Drainage. And the spot fire that we've been talking about is this piece right there. And then I wanted to put another slide with some fire history on it. Probably a lot of you in here remember that these fires, so north of the fire is the Colony Fire in 2021, the KNP complex, and then 2020, the Castle Fire on the other end of it. So where a lot of the fire has been burning in the last few days, where the activity is up in this corner in the northeast, moving from high elevation down into that drainage, a lot of it through that Eden Fire footprint from 2018. So that Eden Fire has helped to moderate fire behavior as it moved through the Eden Creek Sequoia Grove. So one thing that I think you might be interested in is after the meeting, if you look at the fire progression map, and you can see where that Eden Creek Grove is. Look how slowly that fire moved down through the fingers of that grove. So some of the smoke you can see up top on here, that's high elevation, some of the timber, and on the other side of that ridge line through those drainages, that's where the grove was. And the fire behavior was brought down through that grove and allowed to back slowly about as beneficial as it could be under the conditions on the ground out there. So I'm not on Team 15. I'm visiting for 2 weeks, but that's something that I've been really impressed about is the patience and care of letting that fire behavior come down. So looking at that, there's highly likely that there's going to be some benefit from that fire for protecting those groves into the future. So some other things on this picture I'd like to show is in the foreground, you can see that there's grass in the yellow. That's looking across the the footprint from the KNP complex. And then in the foreground, it's kind of mosaic burn. And the fuels on the slope facing, that's overhead brush, very thick, no current fire history, so there's a lot of litter underneath, grass, leaves from decades of buildup. And so this map on this side shows some fuel models. And so that darker green color is what a lot of that fuel looks like. And so you can see where that is. So this is looking up East Fork of Kaweah towards Silver City up there. And this is looking up Horse Creek drainage. And so you can see how that would be a challenge with the wind coming up a drainage, continuous fuel, not a lot of opportunity for those holding features to put handline in. So, and then in the higher elevation, you know, of course, you get up into thinner fuels, into the high elevations, and it gets into the rock and stuff. Okay. Let's see, one more thing I wanted to show you on this slide is right up front here, shows some potential for what can happen with wind and slope alignment. So talking about topography in this area, some of the challenges of topography, trying to hold it in a drainage bottom, is that it's easy for fire to get across those drainages. It's really difficult to get down there. So you'll have preheating from one side where the fire is burning to the opposite side. It just takes one ember across, you get a spot fire, you can have burning material roll down and hop across. So what this is looking at, and oh yeah, that was the other thing I wanted to tell you, is that when it gets to the other side, the other thing with topography is that the fire moves rapidly uphill. So that's when operation was talking about it's not a safe place to be above that fire. And so that's what happened in this potential. This was one afternoon, and that's a couple hundred acres approximately. And that fire moved with greater than 20-foot flame lengths and faster than a person would be able to move through there. So that informs you can't have people on the ridgeline waiting for the fire to come up there. You have to have a plan in place, which they did. The fire got to the ridgeline, used the aircraft, and then after the fuels are burned below them, the crew can get up there. And now that area is providing a little bit of a buffer as they continue to work and secure it and cool that edge. That'll help provide a buffer for any more fire going up the canyon. I think I'm ready for the next slide, please. I'm done. Okay. No pen, thank you. Okay. I'm going to put the pen down. Okay, these are some factors that go into large fire growth in this area. And this is from some local knowledge and analysis. So for much of the week that I've been here, several of the days have had all of these factors going. And so especially Monday and Tuesday, that relative humidity got very low, less than 15% for parts of the day. The 1,000-hour fuel moisture, less than 10%. And what those 1,000-hour fuels are the large diameter dead fuels that'll be on the surface. So they dry out over the season. And so when they get down to this fuel moisture, they're available to burn, contribute to fire behavior. Wind speeds greater than 7 miles per hour, and hot temperatures. So the good news is today was a turn on the weather. And so relative humidities are higher now. The temperatures are down. And winds have moderated quite a bit. So the fuels are going to take a while to dry out. We're at the peak season in September, and fuels will gradually dry through the season until fire season ends, typically the end of October or beginning of November when it rains. The projected period, the next 5 days, is expected to look really good and hold those conditions with the temperature and relative humidity. Next slide. I wanted to talk about historical drought with the KNP complex. For those of you who remember how that fire burned, I wasn't here, but it's interesting to look at. In the year 2020, when the Castle Fire burned, there was moderate drought here. And then in 2021, with the KNP complex, it was exceptional drought. So this year is very dry, but not in drought, and drought is not expected to develop this season. So looking better with drought conditions, and that affects the trees, the large trees aren't as available for the fire movement. Next slide. And this is the last slide, looking at outlooks. The area that we're in is this piece here. And so it continues to show above normal fire behavior for September, but not projected for the rest of the year for this area to keep holding that above normal. It'll return to normal in October is what's projected. That's the end of my briefing.
Thank you so much for that, Rita. Now I'd like to invite up Chief Charlie Norman of the Tulare County Fire Department. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. I was coming up, I was late to every meeting I had today, and I left Visalia at 4:30 with that being known, and I got behind tourists on the lake. And everybody was going 40 miles an hour until they hit the 3-lane, then they sped up to 60. So it was, I feel for the Three Rivers residents up here. Yeah, it was an experience. So I just want to introduce a couple of our folks. We have Agency Rep, Division Chief Jeff Smith. He's going to be in the incident starting yesterday. We have Jennifer Fox, who's Eddie Valero's representative. I think I saw her in her early. There's Jennifer. She's with the camera. Hey, shut the camera off. But we've been in lockstep since the beginning of this fire. We've committed approximately 40% of our department here at the height of this incident. I say at the height of the incident because we hope it's ramping down at this point. Very excited to work with this group. I appreciate all the comments. I used to have one of my colleagues that would always flash the laser pointer at me if I went beyond 2.5 minutes in a briefing, but all you guys would have been flashed. So I'm going to try and avoid that. With our numerous resources we've committed from the county standpoint, working lockstep with the team, and I think Andy brought it up earlier, we will be present in Mineral King, Silver City community. We'll keep working when it hits any of our management action points to engage in there. So if you see us up there, we'll be up there for a purpose, a suppression purpose, and not to get the community too excited, but we will be there well in front should this thing expand. But even more important than that, I think Three Rivers, a Fire Safe Council that Mr. Lamar is involved with, we've done some pre-incident hardening in the community. Our Tree Mortality Forest Health Group, our fuels crew, has done some great work on the South Fork that has really helped us prior to this incident, and we've done a lot of work in the Mineral King area. So prepping before we have the fire is so important to us. Yeah, there's a lot of other things I could say, but as we do this, we have a full commitment to this incident, but we also have 16,000 other calls that we run in the county on the valley floor. So it's a very busy department, but we're very committed to this incident, and we want the same things. And like everybody knows here, most people don't call me Chief, they call me Charlie, or if they don't long call them, they call me Charles. So by all means, we're here, and I'll be here for the duration of the incident. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief. All right, before we move into our question and answer section, I'd like to bring up our Incident Commander, Nick Elmquist, for some closing thoughts.
All right, thanks, Ben. I'll just keep it short so we could get to the Q&A and get you guys out of here in a timely manner. But just wanted to say it's always a good sign when we see more folks in uniforms and without. So hopefully there's a little sense of optimism in the room, and I hope you get the sense that we're optimistic as well. Well, one of the main goals of incident management teams, we're the second incident management team that's been on this incident. Before us, it was California Team 5, is really to outplan, 4, 5, 6 days to try to set the incident up for success, for resource allocation, really. And that really became more difficult when a lot of those fires down south you've been hearing about are going through towns. But we've done a pretty good job from our staff and standpoint of really just trying to get as much stuff that we have here to stay to try to finish this job, because there's been a tremendous amount of investment, both fiscally and all the hard work of firefighters, and there's still some critical values at risk out ahead of it. But as you guys get the feel that we're all pretty confident that it's probably going to stay in its current footprint. The last thing I'd just like to say is, incident management teams are really only as strong as the local units that are supporting them. Team 5 was here before us, like I mentioned. We're here now. We're going to be briefing a third incident management team tomorrow evening. They're going to shadow on Saturday and take control on Sunday. And that really has to do with the potential that if something were to move out, that we have the horsepower here in terms of the command staff to manage that incident. But really, the people that are going to be here, they've been here from the beginning, and they're going to be here throughout the incident, are all the local agencies that have spoken before me. So you're lucky to have those people integrated here into the organization, and they're going to remain until the bitter end. We get the opportunity to go all across the West to incidents. Our team 15 was up in Northeast Washington and Lake Chelan. Beautiful area, but we always appreciate coming to Southern California because that's really where we have the most tools to be able to implement plans like that. So we all feel very fortunate. So, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our incident commander, Tom Clemo, and the rest of Team 15. The staff will be here for a few more days, but we've had nothing but support, and you welcome this community. At the largest point, we've had 1,500 people assigned to the fire. I checked on the way in. I think Three Rivers is around 2,000, so almost doubled the population. And now we're dwindling back down. We're at about 1,000, and hopefully we can continue to dwindle with the successful operations. I want to make it really clear. Our incident commander reminded me when I came up here that we are going to start moving resources up into Cabin Cove and Silver City just to do some preparation work, lockstep with Tulare County and CAL FIRE and the Park Service, and making sure that we're doing the right thing, communicating that to all the residents there. And if, high likelihood it won't be used in this fire, but it will be better positioned for future fires if that were ever the case. So we'll get to the Q&A. Appreciate you guys coming up and appreciate the support. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the formal portion of our brief. At this point, for my public affairs specialist, did we take any questions on the index cards? All right, before I go ahead and close this out, are there any questions in the audience? Sir.
I would just like to say on behalf of Three Rivers, need the mic. On behalf, well, I don't need the mic, but I better use the mic. On behalf of Three Rivers, I got involved with the Fire Safe Council because of my wife. She's been working with Fire Safe Councils throughout the state for the last number of years. And I've got to say, on the last 3 big fires we've had, the cooperation of all of our CAL FIRE, Tulare County, everything here is better than anywhere else. For those of you who don't know how lucky we are to have as a team we have in this town and to fight our fires, we're very, very lucky. And I just Three Rivers wants to thank all of you for doing what you do and working together so well.
Thank you for that. Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody who's joined us in person, as well as everybody who's viewing online, for being on this community meeting. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and close out the meeting. Thank you and have a good evening.